Later on in 1967, the Cougars basically integrated the state of Mississippi with their games at Ole Miss and Mississippi State that year. And when they played Ole Miss in Oxford, there were death threats for Warren McVea leading up to the game. 2 or 3 plays during that game explained how concerned Warren McVea was, and it literally affected the outcome, didn't it, Robert?
Yes, and this was probably the one story when I talk to people and think like that, I just couldn't fathom something like this happening. On back-to-back weekends in October of 1967, U of H went to play Mississippi State in Starkville, and then the next week they went to Oxford to play Ole Miss. By then, Warren had other African-American teammates. His first year in 1965, he was the only black player on the field most of the time. But a couple years later, his senior year, he had some help or some other black players. And he was getting death threats when they were going to go to Ole Miss. Coach Yeoman had received word and things like that. One of the threats was if Warren was going in for a touchdown, he was going to be shot. As it turns out, couple 3 times in the game, and I've read the newspaper accounts of this, and and Coach Yeoman told me this story, is that a couple times Warren looked like he might be in the clear to run for a touchdown, and he was caught from behind by an Ole Miss defensive back. And if you know anything about Warren McVea, he was a world-class sprinter, and once he got out in front of somebody, nobody was going to catch him. And then there was another time in the second quarter of that game against Ole Miss, from what I've read once again from the newspaper accounts and what people have told me, he went through a gaping hole in the line, and he was going to run for about a 50, 60-yard touchdown. And all of a sudden, after about 10 or 15 yards, he just flat fell down. There was nobody within 10 yards of him. Coach Yeoman asked Warren a couple, 3 weeks after the game, what the deal was. And Warren told Coach that, hey, I was afraid that if I was out in the open field like that, they could shoot me. He said if I'd have been on the goal line where a bunch of players were grouped together, he probably would have tried to score. And the thing is, the Cougars lost that game 14-13. I actually got to interview a fan that went to the game, drove all night and went there. And he said they were sitting up in the stands and they were wondering why in the heck Warren kept falling down, and they couldn't believe it. But then, word of this story started getting out through the years and everything. And then they realized, what the deal was. But you talk about discrimination or racism playing a role in a football game, as a prime example.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.